Hey guys, this is Erica from Celiac and the Beast, and welcome to the GlutenAway virtual gluten-free expo. It's like I'm right there with you guys, even though I'm not. I'm clearly in my house. So, welcome, and I am actually going to be talking today about gluten-free mistakes and whether you've been gluten-free for a very short time or a very long time. Chances are you've made plenty of mistakes, but that's okay because all of us do. It's just kind of part about learning how to live on a gluten-free diet. So, in case you didn't know, I wrote a book. It is called Celiac and the Beast, a love story between a gluten-free girl, her genes, and a broken digestive tract. So that's a little bit about me. There's actually a part in here about gluten-free mistakes. So in case you didn't catch it all or want a little bit more info, it's in the book, available on Amazon. I think I actually have a booth in this expo. So again, thank you so much, Taylor, for that. And I made a PowerPoint presentation about gluten-free mistakes, so you're about to see it, and I hope you learn a lot from it, but I also hope that you learn that we're all just a part of a big gluten-free family. Taylor's a part of it, I'm a part of it, any amazing gluten-free blogger that's out there is really a part of it. We're here to support you on your way to a healthy lifestyle with a gluten-free diet, whether you have celiac disease, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, other autoimmune diseases, or have just found out through proper testing methods that you need to be on a gluten-free diet. We are here to support you, and we're here to answer questions and really be a foundation for you to grow and learn on a gluten-free diet. So I hope that you enjoy my presentation on first-timer mistakes, even though it's not just for first-timers. I know some of you are still learning, even though you've been around for a long time, and I think we all should learn consistently on this diet. I hope you enjoy it, and if you have any questions, just go ahead and let me know. Thanks so much to Taylor and GlutenAway and the GlutenAway family for letting me be a part of this virtual event, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thanks so much. Enjoy! Hey, this is Erica from Celiac and the Beast, and I am here today to talk to you about first-timer mistakes. Now, this presentation is not just for people who just learned that they're gluten-free. It's also for people who just want a refresher course on the common mistakes that people make when initially going gluten-free. If you guys aren't familiar, I just completed my book, and it's out available to the general public. Launched in October 2013, Celiac and the Beast, a love story between a gluten-free girl, her genes, and a broken digestive tract. I talk a lot about first-timer mistakes in this book because I feel like it's a very applicable subject to someone newly diagnosed, or even someone like me who's been doing it for 5 years. I just gave a presentation at the Phoenix Gluten and Allergen Free Expo, and there were still people that learned something from this presentation, even if they've been gluten-free for a while, or think that they've been following all the proper procedures and protocols. First, let's start with getting tested. This is really the first thing that you need to do in order to figure out if you are celiac or a non-celiac gluten sensitive person. Many people ask me why get tested, if I remove gluten from my diet and I just feel better. I just don't really understand why I need to be tested. While celiac disease is more than just a food intolerance, it's actually an autoimmune disease. So if you know anything about autoimmune diseases, the body will actually start attacking itself. This will lead not only to other autoimmune diseases that can be related to celiac disease, but also something like you need to check your nutrition levels. You need to check to see if all of your vitamins are up to speed, because if you are a true celiac, you'll often have vitamin deficiency, as well as getting tested for something like osteopenia and osteoporosis. Even at a young age, at 25, I had osteopenia, and that's something that I wouldn't know unless I knew that I was a celiac. Also, celiac has certain perks, right? You get a chance to use it as a tax deduction. So if you're not using it as a tax deduction, you actually have a note from your doctor being diagnosed as celiac, make sure that you're talking to your CPA about that. But mostly it's peace of mind. You know that that's your actual problem. You know that it's not something else lingering in the distance. You know it's not another food intolerance. You know that it's actually an autoimmune disease. So it's very important for you to know that it's actually celiac or it's not celiac. So, how do you get tested? Listen, this is a very touchy subject, but it's also a subject that I get many questions on fairly regularly. I always consult the Celiac Disease Foundation website, as well as some other key websites like the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness and the uh, University of Chicago Celiac Disease Research Center that they have there, and I follow their proper protocols. Why? Because many doctors don't actually know the proper way to test people for celiac disease. I've heard way too many stories of doctors telling people to just go gluten free and then giving them the blood test or the endoscopy when they're not actually still eating gluten, which is a huge no no. And I feel like if you're empowered as a customer, you're going to get a better experience because you're going to get a proper diagnosis. So I like to teach people the proper way on how to get tested, which first is a blood test while you're still eating gluten. Make sure that you are still eating gluten for a long period of time, especially if you're reintroducing it into the diet for the test. Also, make sure that you have a doctor who can actually correctly interpret the results. I know that's terrifying to think that some doctors don't know how to read it, but make sure you go to a doctor who has diagnosed several people with celiac disease before and knows the proper protocols for it. Once you have a blood test, you further go to the gold standard, which is a endoscopy. So they stick a little tube down your throat, take some samples, and figure out if your villi have been affected by celiac disease. Now, it's also important that when you have this, you are still eating gluten. If you're not eating gluten, your villi will not be affected by gluten, which is the whole point of being on a gluten-free diet. But it's not very helpful when you're actually getting diagnosed. So make sure that you're eating gluten. I believe Mayo Standard is now 6 to 12 weeks before your endoscopy. And make sure that your doctor is taking an appropriate number of samples. When I was at the International Celiac Disease Symposium, it was crazy how many GIs didn't take enough samples and therefore weren't properly diagnosing their consumers with celiac disease because they just weren't taking enough samples. This is something that you can consult with the Celiac Disease Foundation or your gastroenterologist about how many samples they take. However, just going with someone who actually understands the proper diagnosis for celiac disease is huge. So again, make sure that you're eating gluten for your endoscopy in order to get the best results. Now, I also had genetic testing. Celiac disease is autoimmune and it's caused by genes. So you can get genetic testing, especially if your insurance covers it. Some insurances don't. But it can't tell you if you have active celiac disease. It will only tell you if you have the potential for celiac disease with your genes. I, however, needed to know everything. I had a very wonky diagnosis process. So at this point, I was just begging for the genetic test to know if I could even have the potential for celiac disease because it seemed like the only way that I could really figure it out was to put all the pieces together because I didn't have the quote unquote traditional symptoms. So those are the three kind of standard methods that you can use for celiac disease diagnosis. Again, if any of these turn up negative, you can still have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. I mean, if you feel better not eating gluten and you don't have a celiac disease diagnosis, meaning you've been tested but it came out negative, then keep on not eating gluten. There's nothing wrong with removing gluten from your diet as long as you figured out if you're a celiac or not. Again, because it's so important that you figure out if you have an autoimmune disease because of the detriment to your health. If you're a celiac, you can never cheat. You can never have that cookie. You need to be so careful when you go out to restaurants. It's not just something that you can take lightly. It's a very intense autoimmune disease, and you need to be thinking about your health and about gluten 24/7. So that's why you need to be tested for celiac. You need to know how critical it is for you to stay true 100% to the gluten-free diet. And if you are a celiac, you need to quit eating any sort of gluten and be 100% committed to your diet for your health. If not, there is long-term consequences. again, increased chances of cancer based on, continuing to eat gluten with the celiac disease diagnosis. So very important that if you are tested for celiac disease and it's positive, you're very careful about what you eat. I think one of the biggest issues for celiacs today is cross-contamination, meaning, gluten's a hugger, right? Gluten is super friendly and it loves to give hugs. And when it gives hugs and it touches things, it leaves little pieces of gluten behind that can make a celiac or a non-celiac gluten-sensitive person very sick. And the thing that you need to know about cross-contamination is that it's everywhere and it's very, very difficult to avoid. For this, it's really about putting on your detective hat. It's about playing Sherlock Holmes and about really using your voice as a celiac to not only figure out where gluten's hiding, but also to be assertive when you tell other people how you want your food prepared in order to avoid getting sick. So gluten is everywhere, right? We know that. It's in restaurants. So this is really important to know about what you need to do when dining out. And I even wrote 3 different chapters about dining out in my book, Celiac and the Beast. Restaurants are hard, especially if you're shy. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a type A personality. So it's really easy for me to step foot inside a restaurant and demand exactly what I need. And even when that happens, I still get glutened at restaurants, even though I try. Especially if you've read the book, you've heard some of my horror stories about getting sick from a restaurant. But know that it is possible. I don't want you guys to think that you all have to be hermits and make every single meal at home. There is a way, especially if you're living in a larger city where there's restaurants that truly understand celiac disease. Luckily, Phoenix is one of them. I feel very fortunate being here. Again, this is not for the meek. This is not for the shy. When you come into a restaurant, you have to know that you're going to be the weirdo. You have to know that you're going to be the freak at the table, and you have to accept that and move on. Because you're there to inform the restaurant that you want to dine safely and that you want to dine without getting sick. There's tips and tricks in my book. I don't want to harp on that too much, but it's just about asking the right questions and telling them exactly what you need. Going in, maybe fibbing and saying it's like a food allergy. Scientifically, we know that it's not. However, food service people have been trained about food allergies, or most of the good ones are. When you walk in, you say I have a peanut allergy, they know what it is. But if you say, oh, I'm a celiac or I'm gluten intolerant, they may just think that you're doing it for a fad. Again, unfortunate because of the fad that's happening today. But you have to walk in, you have to say, I am celiac, which means that I am gluten-free. I get very sick whenever I eat wheat, rye, barley, or contaminated oats. Do you have a gluten-free menu? And then if they do, ask them more about it. And then ask them about what happens in the back of the house. Because not everything happens, with the waiter. They can put in your order, but the back of the house may not know. I always tell them to inform the chef directly and inform the people directly that it is an allergy and that it is very important that my food does not touch anything containing gluten, that it's not made on the same surface, that we're using, separate ingredients. So there are certain things that you can do. There is a certain protocol that you can follow dining out. It's different for any restaurant. Say if you're doing a breakfast restaurant, make sure that your eggs and gluten-free pancakes and waffles are made on separate surfaces. If you're doing a pizza restaurant, that's a whole nother issue. Make sure that it's prepared in a separate area. There's pre-made dough that's kept separate, so the flying flour or cornmeal that has touched gluten doesn't contaminate your pizza. Make sure that they're using separate ingredients, that there's a layer between that and the pizza pan that they're actually going to put into the oven. So again, there's protocols for you to follow, but don't be scared about it. It's just what we have to do in order to dine out at restaurants. The next thing is about manufacturing a shared facility, and I try my absolute hardest to not eat anything that's been manufactured in the same facility as something with wheat, just because I know how tricky it is and how gluten loves to hug everything that it touches. I definitely would recommend that you stay away from food made on shared equipment. If you've ever seen videos on how they actually clean equipment, even if they have good standards, it's really hard for me to believe that it's actually going to be clean to our liking and our what we need to have as a celiac. So again, make sure that you're very wary when you see, even if it doesn't contain gluten, make sure that it's not on shared equipment. Trader Joe's is notorious for food that is labeled no gluten containing ingredients, which is a sign that although it may not have any gluten in it, it may be, bastardized during the manufacturing process, and you could still get sick from it. Again, these are important things for you to do, and always read the label, make sure that it's good manufacturing processes, and make sure that you're trying to eat as much food as you possibly can out of a dedicated gluten-free facility. So you may see something in the grocery store that's labeled wheat-free. And so because wheat is, I guess, the biggest face of gluten, you may think that it may also be gluten-free as well. I know I've received gifts of wheat-free cookies, and I know that other people have eaten, especially wheat-free cookies, because they thought that it was gluten-free as well. However, many of these items also contain rye, barley, especially barley malt, or contaminated oats aren't necessarily gluten-free. Why are there products that are wheat-free? Again, I have no idea. If they're doing it to market to gluten-free, they're obviously doing it wrong. Now, I do have a really good friend, Mary Fran, that actually has a wheat allergy. So she has anaphylaxis to wheat, meaning she's got to stab herself in the thigh with an EpiPen if she ingests wheat, which is a little bit more intense than me, who waits actually like a week or two for symptoms. So if she's out to dinner, obviously her items need to be wheat-free, but in general, she orders things that are gluten-free because it's just kind of the wards of the day when it comes to, eating out of a restaurant. However, there are still products that are labeled gluten-free. So remember brow, which is barley, rye, contaminated oats, and obviously wheat. When you look at the food allergy statement, only wheat has to be in this contained statement because it is classified as one of the top 8 allergens. While a wheat allergy may be different, for gluten-free, obviously you need to look for rye and barley. So you've got to put on your detective hat, do some sleuthing, and make sure that you're looking for that sneaky barley and rye, especially barley. Barley malt is hidden in so many things. I mean, think about Rice Krispies. I'm sure that you've been offered so many Rice Krispies and people just assume that they're gluten-free because snap, crackle, and pop, it's just rice. Why can't it be gluten-free? Well, barley malt is this delicious flavoring that apparently everyone loves to hide in items, especially Rice Krispies. So, as you know, they came out with the gluten-free Rice Krispies. So, unless your Rice Krispie treats are made with that, don't eat them because it contains that sneaky barley malt. So make sure when you see that it does not contain wheat in the allergen statement, that you're also investigating for barley and rye. Again, that can be hidden in natural flavors and some other secret code words for gluten. So make sure that you are checking for all of the ingredients and not just relying on that contained statement and the allergen information. Speaking of hidden gluten and different names for gluten, there are so many different names for gluten. There's spelt, emmer, kamut, einkorn, durum, triticum, bran, bulgur, couscous, graham, matzah, seitan. I almost want to call it Satan because that's kind of what it feels like, especially if you've read my book and you've heard that story. Oh my gosh, so awful. Anyways, gluten is hiding everywhere, and it's especially hiding in these. Especially with this new big trend towards ancient grains. We've got, cashew making crackers that are ancient grains. So because you're seeing things like quinoa and amaranth, which are gluten-free grains, you kind of think, oh, maybe this is safe for me, right? Ancient grains, that's fine. Well, wrong, because they're also including all these gluten-containing ancient grains, especially spelt. For some reason, spelt is always an issue with the gluten-free community, and there's no reason for it to be because spelt is gluten. Although it is a low gluten grain, if you are a celiac or you have symptoms with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, do not eat spelt. You will get sick. So just make sure that you're checking for all these different names of gluten, especially malt. Malt can be an issue, again, like barley malt, like we said before, for flavorings. You know what? Even look at it in teas. There are a lot of teas that will use it, especially like a celestial seasoning that has a holiday flavor. I know that there were only two that were gluten-free and the other ones contained gluten. So they're using it to flavor it as well. Remember, wheat is a cheap filler. So think about it not as like, oh, there's no bread in this product, there's no bread in tea. Well, they could be using it as a flavor or a filler. Just watch out for sneaky gluten again. So when you're looking at labels, a lot of people get freaked out by modified food starch. If it's in the US, modified food starch is going to be corn unless, again, it says wheat in the contain statement. So don't be too freaked out if a food is labeled gluten-free and you still see modified food starch, because that means that it's coming from corn. If you have a corn allergy, I really can't help you with that. But make sure that you're always reading labels. Even if something has a shelf tag on it that is gluten-free, always check the labels before putting it in your cart. And always check, especially with brands that may have a gluten-free brand and a gluten-containing brand like Annie's. Make sure you're grabbing the right mac and cheese container. It can be very tricky, but it shouldn't, as long as you put on your gluten detective hat and read the labels for everything. As a celiac or someone with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, it is always important to even watch out for danger zones within your own home. So check out your kitchen. I think one of the first things we tell you is to replace your toaster. If you haven't done that yet, think about all the weird stuff that's stuck inside your toaster from ghosts of gluten past that's hanging out in there. Please replace it. Also, please replace any porous surfaces that you may have used, like to cut bread on a wooden board or using any wooden utensils. Also, if you have a colander or little things that are really hard to clean, make sure that you clean that out just in case. Make sure that you don't have any gluten still stuck in there from your previous life. Bathroom man, you gotta watch out for items that you ingest. So as a woman, you can ingest, I think it's like 7 pounds of lipstick over your whole life. So make sure when you're using lip balm or lip gloss that it's gluten-free. I can recommend a great company, Red Apple Lipstick, that has a ton of fantastic paraben-free, gluten-free lipstick, lip glosses, lip balms for you guys to use. Other things in the bathroom, there's lotion, shampoo, and conditioner. So at the International Celiac Disease Symposium, we learned that the gluten molecule does not go through skin. It cannot permeate. However, if you have any cuts or scrapes, make sure that you're not using any gluten lotion. Also, I know that many people topically react to gluten. I know for sure my head goes insane when I use gluten-filled shampoo or conditioner. So all of my Bath and Beauty products are gluten-free. You don't necessarily have to do that. However, if you think about the number of times that soap or shampoo has gotten inside your mouth or inside your eyes or your nasal cavity when you are in the bathroom, I just wouldn't even take that risk. Honestly, there are so many great products out there that are gluten-free for the bathroom. I just replaced everything and I feel so much better about it. Medicine cabinet is huge. There are so many medicines like an Advil capsule, for instance, that you wouldn't think contained gluten, and they do. So make sure before you ingest anything, and this includes medication, that you check to make sure it's gluten-free. There's a great website, glutenfreedrugs.com, that you can check all of your medication against, but we always recommend checking with your manufacturer to see if they use any gluten-containing ingredients during the process. There are several brands that actually label their products. I believe Target, CVS, and Walgreens label many of their products gluten-free. So make sure you're checking for that as well. Fido's food dish. I know that many of you have pets and many of you have chosen to put them on a grain-free diet. My cats are on a grain-free diet simply because they lick everything. They lick me, they lick my food when I'm not looking. They're stepping everywhere. They're getting into my food. For any of you who have seen my Mel's Flour Company bag, my cat likes to eat the flour in there. So the cats are basically everywhere, and just for my safety and my peace of mind, I switched them to a grain-free diet just so I know that they're not being able to transfer gluten. Same goes for your boyfriend or girlfriend. Make sure that if you have a significant other that has gluten in their mouth, that they brush their teeth, floss their teeth, and use some mouthwash before they kiss you because it can transfer between the two oral mucosas. Again, we've already talked about restaurants, so let me talk a little bit about bars. Distilled liquor, I know that this is a touchy subject. Distilled liquor is gluten-free. It has something to do with the distillation process and the gluten molecule. Listen, it's just science. It is just how science is. Distilled liquor, vodka made from, grains, a nice bourbon, which I happen to enjoy, made from rye. Those are all distilled, meaning they no longer contain gluten molecules inside. However, some crappy places add gluten back in after the manufacturing process. So it could be fine after it's distilled, but they may add like a caramel flavor afterwards that contains, wait for it, barley malt. So you're getting gluten even if it's distilled. Always check with the manufacturer. Make sure that it is pure liquor that has been untouched after the distillation process. Again, if you feel like you're drinking something that's distilled and you still feel sick, the answer is don't drink it. But please don't argue with me about the distillation process. That's just science. That's how it is. Also, wine is perfectly safe. You can check with G-Free Foodie if you want the explanation about that as well. Again, if you drink something and you feel crappy, it may be the sulfites, it may be something else, but stop drinking it, please. Also, wine coolers, which I don't know if anyone still drinks wine coolers, but they're awful anyway, so don't drink them. But they may contain barley malt and other gluten-containing ingredients, so just don't drink them. And then when you're over at other people's house, just be safe. Don't eat food that you don't know how it's prepared, especially don't eat food if you don't know what the ingredients are. Make sure you always carry labels, especially for your own products, so you know that it's safe. Labels can be found from glutenfreelabels.com or allermates.com. Also has some labels, especially cute labels for kids. I write a lot in my book about mourning the loss of gluten and going through the stages of loss and the stages of grief, denial, anger. Dealing with a lifelong autoimmune disease is not easy. This is not like, oh, I think I'm gonna, give up red meat for Lent. It's not something that you're going to be able to go back to. And I think the idea of forever is really scary for people. And I think that that's perfectly normal. And I think that a lot of people think that going gluten-free is really easy. But when you look at the intricate nature of what you have to do when you go out, social events, even brushing your teeth before you kiss your significant other, this is a 24/7 lifelong change, and it can be very overwhelming, especially at first. So if you don't take that time to really go through the process of grieving and the process of kind of getting over gluten, it's going to be much harder for you. I think that there's a lot of mistakes out there of people just not getting help when they need it. With a lifelong autoimmune, condition, people might not understand how serious it is. And I think that you need to rely on outside resources for that, such as support groups. So your local Celiac Disease Foundation, Celiac Brew Association, they tend to have local support groups. You can check online to see if your city has one. If not, you can make one. If 1 in 133 or 1 in 100 people have celiac disease, God knows that you're going to find some people in your own city that have it and really support each other and lean on each other during the hard times. Obviously, family and friends are a great resource for you. That's only if they believe you. I hear way too many stories of people whose own family try to sneak them gluten thinking that they're not actually sick, even when they've been diagnosed celiac disease, which is genetic, so chances are one of them has it. I think that's ridiculous, and I'm so lucky to have a great family and great friends, but you know what? If you've sat down with them and told them how serious it is and they still don't get it, it's honestly time for you to get new friends. There's so many people out there, it's just not dealing with drama llamas, right? You just shouldn't have to deal with that, especially if you yourself are struggling. Expos and conferences like the Gluten and Allergen Free Expo, Living Without's new set of expos. There's so many different places out there for you in order to find people just like you. I promise you, you're not alone. And when you come to an expo, you can find plenty of people that are just like you that may also be struggling as well. And lastly, it's totally okay for you to seek help from a professional. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you going to see a therapist for dealing with not only a lifelong autoimmune disease, but all the issues that you may have with social isolation that many celiacs feel. You shouldn't have to cheat just in order to feel like a good person or to feel like you have friends or to feel like you belong. Cheating with celiac disease is never okay, especially when you have so many resources out there that can really help you get feeling well again and hopefully on an entire gluten-free diet after, a few days, a few months, a few years, you're going to feel perfect again. So thank you for listening to my presentation on first-timer mistakes presented by Celiac and the Beast. Class is officially dismissed and you all got an A+. Unless you cheat with gluten and you fail and you'll have to come back and take the class all over again. Anyways, I hope you learned something and I hope you feel like you're not alone out there with celiac disease. With Celiac and the Beast, we're always around doing gluten-free product reviews, going to the latest expo and conferences and learning about new gluten-free food so we can feel perfectly normal in a world filled with wheat. So please see me on celiacandthebeast.com and have a great day.